Hi, this is Chris Newsom. Welcome to the Root Cause Analysis podcast, where we'll take our listeners right to the heart of the important EHS issues. We're coming to you live from Woodland Grange, a conference and hotel venue in the Midlands. Welcome to a very special episode of the Root Cause Analysis podcast. We're joined today by 5 students who studied their diploma with Make UK. We're going to talk to them and find out where that's taken them and what their views are about the world of EHS. So, rather than me introducing everyone here, which will take a very, very long time, we're going to ask you to go along and just tell us who you are and a bit about yourselves. Paul, if we can start with you.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Chris. So my name is Paul Lowe. I am the Brush Group SHE manager. We've got manufacturing facilities in Loughborough, Italy and South Wales, where we manufacture transformers and switchgear. And then we're also a growing business with regards to engineering solutions. And from that, we've got offices all around the country, from the South Coast, so Southampton, Portsmouth, and all over Scotland as well. So we can deliver a service anywhere across the UK.
Okay, thanks Paul. Adam?
My name is Adam Neill. I'm the Chief Environmental Safety Officer for the British Army. I work in the Army Safety Group within the Safety Centre, and our focus is on functional safety, which is the activity that obviously the Army undertakes on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you. David?
Hi, I'm Dave Whitehouse. I'm the Safety Director for Avanti West Coast. So we are a train operating company in the UK. We operate from London to Glasgow, Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, all the big cities. And I oversee a team of safety and environment professionals who manage safety risk on the railway operations.
Brilliant, thank you. Kev?
Hi, I'm Kev Howard-Perry. I'm the Managing Director of Team Safety Limited. I'm a consultant for that company, and I've got a raft of clients from UK and internationally.
Thank you very much. And Paul?
Yeah, I'm Paul Brooks. These days I run my own consultancy business, EHS consultancy. When I took the diploma, I was actually Group Health, Safety, Environment Director for Tata Steel in a global role. That's me.
Okay, thank you very much. So, thank you all for joining us. You all, as you've explained there, got different professions or different jobs nowadays. So, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here. And I think something which our viewers and listeners will get out of the conversation today really is several things, but primarily where things like the diploma, professional studies in health and safety and indeed environment can take you. So thank you for sharing your views in advance and your experiences. What we're going to do, I'll ask you each a question as we go along, but obviously, please join in and we can discuss the various points. Sound okay?
Yeah, good.
Fantastic. Okay. So we'll start with you, Kev, if that's okay. So, when and more importantly, why did you choose health and safety as a career?
That's a good question, actually.
Thank you.
But that goes right back to the beginning, I suppose, when I was 16 years old, and I was actually a steeplejack.
Right.
So, and this was in the era of Fred Dibner, climbing up huge chimneys in Yorkshire with
You don't look that old, I've got to say.
Well, with his PPE of his flat cap and his
Yes.
rolled up cigarette. But actually, I was a climber at the time in a climbing club at school, and one of the teachers got hired to do a pull down a chimney, and we went and used climbing equipment.
Wow.
So we didn't, fall off and get killed. So
Yeah.
the safety was already there. So we already had the safety ingrained from climbing, and then we used that to knock down a big mill chimney, and then subsequently did several others. I then joined the army at 17 and then did a whole career of 37 years in the army, but all through those different levels, right from being a recruit. And I started off as a recruit. I went through all the non-commissioned ranks to W1 Regimental Sergeant Major, then commissioned to Captain Major and finished as a Lieutenant Colonel. Spookily enough, working with Adam in the Army Safety Centre as Deputy Chief Safety for the Army. So all the way through there, I was involved in health and safety, and it's very much ingrained within all of those different aspects of the army, whether it's training, whether it's on operations, whether it's on exercise. Big adventure trainer as well. I was an alpine mountain leader, canoeing instructor, and again, lots of safety in that because it's all about saving lives and, protecting people, their health and safety, and the environment, of course, as well. A lot of spin on that. But what happened as I transitioned towards the end of my career, in the last sort of 5 years, this is where I ended up in the Army Safety Centre. And this is really, I suppose, where you would recognise a more traditional health and safety sort of job, etc. And that's why I started with the NEBOSH General Certificate, which I did here in 2018, and then came back on the Level 6 Diploma here with these guys in 2019. At that time, because we got on so well, and one of the interesting things was all those different industries we come from. What I quickly sort of realised is, being in the army for that long, we were doing exactly the same thing as the train area, right. Tata Steel, you know, engineering, etc. It's all the same, and that was really refreshing actually to realise that everything we do is very similar, and that sort of, and I think with all that background as well, that sort of ignited my interest even more in the subject. I think it sort of proved the system, I suppose, in a way.
Interesting, yeah.
And then on the course, I actually bought the name Team Safety and just sat on it at Company's House. Okay. And then as I got towards the end of my career, I bought a house before COVID came. This is how it's all happened, really. Yeah. And my window fitter, discovering I was Deputy Chief Safety Army, said, can you sort out my health and safety system? Okay. And he was my first client, and I still have him as a client. Wow. I did get permission off Chief Safety Army at the time to have a second job, because you have to do that in the MOD, but kept it very small. Long story short, following on from that, basically, by word of mouth, I picked up other clients. I then subsequently left the Army in 2021, decided just to go part-time, then decided to retire. That didn't work very well mentally, because I needed that mental challenge and you know, brain training and stuff like that. And then decided to go full-time. IOSH route, then through certified to chartered, etc. Other qualifications, auditing, etc., etc., etc. Things I'd used in the military as well all came together. And then by word of mouth, got a contract out in Saudi Arabia, etc. And it's just taken off like a ballistic missile. Yeah. But the good thing for me, I think, is it's providing a healthy, safe world of work all the time, because nobody wants to go to work and injure people or hurt people, etc. And I think it's job satisfaction and life satisfaction to see that stuff bounce back when people are safe.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Just not to ask everyone that question, because that will take a very long time, but you know, do you all generally feel because it sounds almost like there's a you know, you sort of just slip into it to start with through it's just part of your other jobs you've got, but then it becomes more important, health and safety, I mean, and you get a formal qualification.
And I think that's right. So, you know, what Kev described is actually people do health and safety all the time, whether they realise it or not. Yeah. And that was the benefit of coming on the courses here, is that certainly at the level 3, it starts to codify what you're doing naturally. And then when you get onto the diploma, it puts it into that broader context of the why you're doing it, rather than the practical bit, which is the how. Yeah. And of course, as you progress, as Kev has said, and Paul, well, all of us really, you start to realise that, understand it more, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a different reason actually for joining. It was because we were integrating EHS functions within the company, completely separate before. I had an environmental, climate change, energy background, and I took over the combined function. And so I had something like 200 safety professionals across the globe. And basically, I needed to know what I was talking about, number one. And number two, I needed to walk the talk a little bit as well. So I deliberately came, even though I was the director, to do exactly that. And it served the purpose perfectly for me. So.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, because, I mean, I suppose it's quite obvious to say, but if you've got, how many people did you say? 200 yeah. You know, experts working for you, you've got to know a little bit about it, otherwise, you know, for lots of obvious reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just to pick up on that, so I was the quality manager within Brush, and I got asked if I would take on the responsibility for health, safety and the environment, at which I said yes, I'm quite happy to do that, but if I'm going to do it, I need to make sure I've got the right qualifications and competencies and skills to actually fulfill that role. And the business was very supportive, and they gave me the training. And like you were saying, Paul, you know, you need to make sure, you know, you can have a conversation at the right level and you know what you're talking about. If not, you just lose all that credibility. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, yeah, gaining this qualification at this level was really important.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's something you can't just sort of pretend you know what you're talking about. Clearly, I mean, that's a pretty obvious thing to say. But you know, this is an area where you really need to know. There are many of them, but you really need to know what you're talking about, otherwise it can go wrong.
So it's
no,
That's why it's called continuous professional development, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's right.
Every day is a school day, or a refresh or a refinement day.
Yeah. That's right. And it's interesting, I think, Adam, you said the difference between, you do the certificate and you learn how to do, a risk assessment, you learn how to do an accident investigation. But when you get to the diploma, the level 6 version, then it's about, really why you're doing it a bit more, and also I think how you can encourage other people to get involved. There's more of that influencing skills that are in it, I think. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So we're going to go on to Dave now. So part of doing this course, of course, is that it gives you a certain IOSH membership level. So tell us about the route you took to your current level of IOSH membership, and talk a bit about what the sort of plans are next, if you want to.
Yeah, okay. So I think similar to Adam, really, NEBOSH certificate, and then you sort of become, you start your learning journey as a safety person. And there's other, I think like anything in life, role models you come across and people you come across that have took similar journeys, have gone on to become more senior in the safety world. The gateway for diploma was always something that was encouraged.
Right.
I think one of the hidden values of the diploma gateway is probably the shared learning you get from other people in the room, the group and the relationship we've developed as a group through our learning journey, and what we learn from each other, and how you look at different, very similar safety principles, but in very different industries. And as Kev said, they're very common. Took the diploma. It can be something that people fear. Yeah. It can be something that is difficult to balance with your work life, and you have to have a supportive employer. You have to have people, supportive line managers, and you have to have that space to be able to learn. It's a really important investment. And I think, my employer was always very supportive, which I'm grateful for. And I think, gone on to do that, ended up into certified level, developed my CPD, and then moving on the road to chartered membership with your mentorship, in fact, which is, and I think, again, I think one big thing that people probably don't realise when you sign up for a diploma is that shared learning, the network you can develop quickly, and also how that gateway starts to open for mentorship in your own professional development. Because it is to be on top of your game as a safety professional, you do need to continue to self-invest. Yeah. It's not just all about attending courses. You need to look at understanding from other industries and how accidents have happened and what you can do to bring back into your own management systems. I think more and more these days, as at the time the 45,001 transition probably intimated towards, but I think leadership is really key. Yeah. It's not all about being a safety theorist. You need to be able to practice it and also lead a team at the same time that can practice that and influence important stakeholders. Because there's pressure on business, the economic pressures businesses have faced, and sort of what we saw post-pandemic. I think that looks for a different type of safety professional these days. And I think that, the diploma, yes, does satisfy the educational need, but also that need to be able to develop networks and share and ask in a safe space, I think is really crucial, and something I took and I've always been really grateful for. Yeah.
Thank you. There's lots of interesting stuff there. Just to pick on a couple of things. So you talked about, the diploma and the syllabus and different sort of safety professionals nowadays. I mean, I personally have been involved and taught on the diploma for many years. And of course, there was a point where it was, quite in depth about technical areas of health and safety, and it didn't cover those sort of influencing skills and didn't look at really behaviour at all. And nowadays, and certainly the diploma you did, 5 years ago, did we agree it was?
2019.
Okay, 5 years, yeah. So the diploma you did then was definitely talked about strategic things and how to influence people, because having the technical skills is a bit of it, but the other bit, you've got to convince other people to take action. So it's interesting.
So that's the key bit, I think, is convincing people it's worth doing. Because I think there's a lot of industries, micro businesses up to large businesses still don't take it seriously unless there's an accident or incident, and then it gets very serious very quickly. That's right. But I think the skills, it's what Dave was talking about there and you've just highlighted, actually really expand that influence of people, and it does definitely make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes the job easier, doesn't it? You can get other people.
I think sometimes safety can be seen as just the activity to comply with the law. Yeah. But actually what you're doing is you're looking after people. Yeah. Your employees, your people that are your passengers, your customers. And that is a responsibility that every safety person holds, and can be at times daunting, can be pressured, but is something that can be embraced as well. And actually, I think your growing sea of the practitioner out there is people that look about the human aspects of safety, and actually compliance with the law does come as a consequence.
Well,
First objective.
yeah, that's brilliant how you put it. I agree. You know, that the compliance with law is a consequence of just keeping people safe, because that is what the law says as well.
That was one of the beauties of the diploma, was that, talking about behaviours, it was how you could get people to participate rather than health and safety says no. Actually, health and safety says yes, and how can you do it safely? And I think that's, key message, as you just said there, Kev, really, to get everybody to participate. Bear in mind, they're already doing it. They probably just don't realise.
And I think on that as well, we're talking about compliance with the law, but there's also ISO 45001. If we're not careful, people or health and safety practitioners spend all their time looking at compliance rather than looking beyond that and saying, how can we be proactive? What do we need to do differently to keep our people safe? Public, contractors, whatever it may be.
Exactly. And to, sorry, just in danger of repeating again, doing that makes you compliant with the law anyway. So it's all along the same way.
That's what I was going to say. Because if you get if you get the culture right, and like Dave said, everyone's doing it without even realising. Same as Adam said. But if the safety culture is right and strong, and it's what are they doing when nobody's looking? If it's happening, then it's there, isn't it? And that automatically makes you comply with the law, because the law is about stopping bad stuff happening. So if they're just doing it on a day-to-day basis, they're complying with the law anyway. And it's back to that messaging and effective communication with the audience. And if you win the audience and open their eyes that they're actually doing it, everything's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think we'll probably go on to this question in a second. We will go on to this question in a second. But part of the point of doing the diploma, because it can be quite scary, in my opinion. There's a lot of hours, a lot of commitment required. The employer's got to be supportive, as you mentioned there, Dave. There's a lot of effort you've got to put in, and it can be quite daunting and scary, but actually there's a massive benefit in that it gives you the tools to keep people safe. Forget legal compliance, that just comes as well. So that's that. Just before we move on, just come back to something else you said there around actually, the mechanics of IOSH membership. So you finished your diploma, and then you joined IOSH at that point, and in those days it was grad IOSH, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah. I think like anything, right? So are you going to go and do a safety job, or are you going to be a safety professional? Which one is it? I think you answer that question, you get your output of what you do. I think, sometimes people can think that you look up a safety course online and I'm going to go and do that course because I need a certification, as Paul intimated towards, because I need that competency. And then sometimes there's a danger of that's it, I'm done. And I think what the IOSH framework allows is it's a framework to continually push you to develop, isn't it? Because if you need to update your CPD, the network that membership can open up to, but also recognition for your skills and competency in a more professional entity. So, come along, did the NEBOSH. At that point, didn't really consider it as much. I think the diploma really probably brought that more into focus. Because, in the diploma, you're exploring more wide-ranging safety education, aren't you? And NEBOSH is very much pointed to the sort of law, risk assessment, and does brush across other areas of legislation, but doesn't go into it in depth, where the diploma then really does start opening your world up into how you consider it. So IOSH is then the right choice.
Okay, thank you. Right, now, a difficult question for you, Adam. So a lot of people, when they think about this great thing called the diploma that we're all talking about here, it becomes in people's heads the dreaded diploma, and people are really worried about undertaking it, I think, even these days, for a lot of reasons. So what would you say to people who are worried about doing the dreaded diploma?
Don't worry, to be honest. Okay. Don't worry, because the fact that you've even thought about doing a diploma means that you are mentally invested in the subject anyway. Okay. So that's the first step. The second thing, I think, is what everybody's mentioned here, is that you need to have a supportive employer. And I was very fortunate, being a civil servant, that they do embrace professional development. So, they allow you to do it. It does require a certain amount of your own time, obviously. Yeah. But I wouldn't say it's excessive. But the key thing really for me was the fact that, as again has been mentioned, you start to open different aspects which you were vaguely aware of, if you like, at a practitioner basis, without understanding why. And once you get that understanding, and you're never going to know everything, but at least you'll start to begin to know where to look, and then you can follow threads through. But the important thing is that, it puts everything into a context, and it hasn't just been made up. It is still essentially very practical, the application. There is a bit of academic to it, but it's not on a university academic structure, which I think is what puts people off. I was a graduate and I did this. No, I'm more of a practical hands-on, I do that. And that's where I think the diploma fits in quite nicely between the two, because it straddles both aspects without being too much of one or the other. Yeah. But at the end of the day, once you've finished it, you've got a network, and we've stayed in contact for 5 years. You get that shared experience of other industries, and we've been up to Dave's when you were working on Virgin Trains and participated in a health and safety workshop there. Paul's come and talked to the Army about his experiences in Tata Steel. So, you just spread the knowledge. And ultimately, what does that mean? What I think it provides is confidence. And it's confidence both in you as a professional, but also in your organisation, and particularly from my point of view from the Army, that you're not doing something that's left field, that's different, that is new. You're doing something that everybody else is doing, albeit the context is slightly different. And that building confidence is the key thing, and that's what the diploma did for me, certainly.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
I think people worry about the time commitment.
Yeah.
But just to share my journey, which was different to these guys a little bit.
Yeah.
So I actually joined 3 different cohorts.
Okay.
And I did it in a sort of, in a modular way, and very flexible from Make UK's perspective and from my employers. And I did all the modules, just not necessarily in the right order. And obviously these were the 3rd best cohort, you guys.
Yeah.
Just so you know that. Yeah. You expected me to, I know that. But yeah. So I did it differently, did it a very flexible way, which is the only way I could do it, and it worked.
Yeah.
And it took me, basically 3 times as long as these guys, nearly. But it was fine, absolutely fine. So.
Yeah, that's a different perspective, but interesting, and that's still the case today. The diploma is 3 modules, do them in whatever order you like, and it's you can take. I know you didn't, but you can take 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, 6 months. It depends on your other commitments completely. So, that's interesting. Okay, and as you've highlighted a couple of times, you did this qualification together 5 years ago. And this bit about learning from other people, you're still in contact with each other. You were saying before we sat down here, you've got a WhatsApp group you're all on, and do you use that? Do you actually bounce health and safety questions off each other and get advice and that sort of stuff? And how does that?
Not generally, no, because we've all gone our separate ways. Okay. Yeah. But then myself and Dave bumped into each other. Yeah. The other day, but again doing the same thing. Right. Again, so it's like going out and coming back again. So
I feel like we've come back around almost full circle again.
Because when we bumping into Paul again and Paul, and I haven't seen Adam for a while, apart from on WhatsApp, just on a different group. But it was like we'd never been apart. Yeah. So it's right back to 2019. And I think getting back to the modular effect, that's what it was like when we did the diploma. Yeah. That we came together with really good gaps in between the different modules to do the extra work, etc. Yeah. And actually start applying. I remember Adam saying when we got back to Army headquarters after module 1, we started applying it straight away, the stuff from module 1. Even though, highly experienced and competent already, it's like, it's just adding extra layers on top all the time. Yeah. And we found that again with module 2 and module 3. Yeah. And I think each time we came back together, we were chatting away as like we'd never been apart. And again, we bumped into Paul first in the room, and we were immediately talking health and safety, environmental protection and everything else, and just swapping stories. And again, the same stuff.
But the thing about this is, so Kev and I have supported Dave previously. Paul has supported Kev and I previously. Yeah. So, it's still networks working on. And actually, if we needed to, not needed to, if you wanted to, we know
We
we
know
don't.
where we are. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
And hasn't the world changed since we did our diploma?
Yeah.
The pandemic we
A
went
lot of
through.
things, a lot of
Risk
things.
management of what it was then, thus what I go back to, that the always emerging way of how you need to manage differently, but with the same principles, really is a good reflection. When we got back together and thought, it's been 5 years, 6 years since we were first in a room, and actually what have all of our businesses and lives been through since that point?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, and there's no other real way to get such a tight group. There's nothing like, I don't think, the sort of dynamic that you've got. In different ways, you were together literally in a classroom for 3 2-week blocks, or over a period of time.
We, post-COVID, maybe a migration to online learning or Zoom and stuff like that. Actually, the benefit of engagement in a group, their physical engagement, I think has manifested itself here, really.
And I think sometimes that channel there, as in the remote channel, can come as a choice of pressures around time.
Yeah, for sure.
It can. People, time being away from home, of course. Yeah. It's not just about the diploma, is it? Let's be dead honest, that there's a need to be away from home. That comes as a sacrifice. There's a need for you have to travel to the place where but then you go backwards and think, how much are you looking to invest in yourself? What type of skills are you looking to develop? And from an employer perspective, you are investing in your own employees. And actually, the stronger your employee, the better safety systems you get. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, there are different ways of learning, and there's lots of different ways of learning nowadays, and it's got to suit the individual people. But what I remember from your group is you'd be in the classroom till whatever time it might be, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 2 o'clock, who knows? But
depending on the trainer.
Indeed. But then
some better than others.
Anyway. They mean I was the best. Anyway, so you'd leave the classroom and you could then sort of, not that you talk about health and safety and the environment all evening, but you've got that opportunity.
Sometimes you can't help it. I call it sticky safety.
Yeah, very good.
And then you're just seeing stuff. And you've won when your wife or your friends starts doing sticky safety without even realising, that fire extinguisher is not 1 metre off the floor. Gotcha.
Excellent.
Because normally they're coming back and saying, this is so boring.
Yeah.
It's such a boring subject.
Sure. Yeah.
I said, but this is your life. So you're saying your life's boring. Everything you do is safety. Safety first, it never sleeps.
No, I can relate to that. My family love health and safety, to be honest. They really do. I can't stop them talking about it. And yes, that's why they like it. Thank you. I've never really thought of it that way. Appreciate that, yeah. So we've done the dreaded diploma question, Adam. So we'll then come to Paul. So Paul, getting a bit outside of the qualification now, you've done that. You've talked about how you've progressed in your careers and where you all are. So in your, looking back with all your experience, what do you think the sort of best and worst things about the health and safety world are these days?
I think even still today, one of the biggest challenges is getting people to think differently. Okay. Getting people to be proactive, think outside of their own process. Now it's easy once we've had an accident because people go, oh yeah, that process was unsafe, wasn't it? Why didn't we see that? We should have done something different. But talking to the person who's been doing the same process for goodness knows how many years, can't see the hazards, don't see it, getting them to do something different is very difficult. Now, the diploma does actually get you to think differently, and it helps you actually tackle these important subjects as well with individuals. So I think that can still be something very difficult because the person who's been doing that activity does not see the risks associated with it. So and then if we think about the good things, I think all of a sudden, if we look at the hierarchy of control, if you remove the hazard, even better. Yeah. But things change. It may be that we go and we introduce some new form of PPE, that prevents people from being harmed, injury, ill health, whatever it may be. Now that I think is really rewarding, because if you can walk around the shop floor or whatever it may be, a construction site, and you see, actually, we introduced that 6 months ago, and they're still doing what we said we wanted them to do. So now they're working safe, which means they're not going to be injured, and we're protecting their health. I think that is really valuable.
Yeah, interesting.
I think you touched on it at your first point as well, that trying to get someone to think widely or differently from their process. Because invariably, if they've been doing a process for a long time, they're no longer doing that process.
Yeah.
And so they've changed it without realising it, shortcuts or whatever, and then you get complacency creeping in, and then if you have a lack of supervision, you know, you're as you say, you're one step removed, but you can see the Swiss cheese forming.
Oh, you can,
it's trying to...
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And you can link back to that, you know, would I teach a new starter to perform this task in the way that I'm actually performing it today?
Correct, yeah.
Yes or no? Invariably, you're going to say no, you know, because there's a safer way or there's a different way of actually performing that. Yeah. And that's what we need to think. You know, we need to be proactive rather than wait for an incident to occur and then go and put a corrective action in place. It's too late then. Somebody's been harmed. Yeah. You know, we don't want that.
Yeah.
And how much of that stuff is about human behaviour and not in terms of doing the wrong thing, I don't mean, but, you know, you talked there about convincing people to do things a different way or, you know, tell you there's a problem or whatever it might be.
Well, this is the point about having, I think it's been mentioned, well, Paul mentioned it the other, an engaged workforce.
Yeah.
You've got to have the workforce engaged. You can only have that by engaging with them yourself. Yeah. You know, and then it becomes a two-way street. Yeah. If they feel isolated and no one pays any attention, that's when, you know, you're setting yourself or them up for failure in whatever.
But on the back of that engagement starts right at the top of the organisation. Yeah. So all of us, you know, we've all got a boss, we've all got a leader somewhere, you know, and this has got to start right at the top, and then it's got to be cascaded down. Yeah. You know, it's no good, you know, seeing somebody working unsafe and walking by and ignoring them. Because if you do, basically you say, yeah, that's okay, that's acceptable.
Safety culture, isn't it?
It's that safety culture. Yeah, that's it, yeah. You know, Saturday and Sunday. Weekends, for example, does safety exist on a Saturday and Sunday? Well, it certainly should. It shouldn't be any different. It should be there 7 days a week, 24/7.
And I think you're right saying that the diploma puts you in that space, more of that leadership management and into the coaching space and mentoring space as well. To get that effective communication across and win that audience right down to the coalface, the sharp end, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. The people who are operating the machines, the ones who are owning the risk. Because it's great if the leadership and you know and all the layers of management have got all these shiny safety management systems, whether electronic paper or a blend of. But if it's not happening in real time, it's completely useless. So I think that the diploma does take you from the general certificate level into that space of more interaction with human behaviours, definitely, and sort of intertwines it and weaves it all together. Yeah, and then the gaps in between going away and practicing it, and then of course after the diploma, you know, this is just the beginning. You're on the start line, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
That level, then you're building on that as well.
An interesting 3 words there: ownership of risk.
Yeah,
I think that's a really interesting way that we're moving through society, and we've got different generations of people that learn and operate in different ways. There's different distractions. There's the on-demand culture that's post-COVID of people now manage those through their emails, and actually how much time do we get out and engaging, that word engagement. Yeah. But actually ownership of risk, where does that sit in organisations, and how do those owners manage the risks they're the owner of? I think is a really important, you know, that point around leadership and where the safety team sit and how they influence, and then how the wider functions then own their risks.
Yeah. I think during the course it was said, wasn't it, those who create the risk control the risk. So, you know, and that's stuck with that. That's so, yeah.
And risk appetite.
Yeah.
And then the cultural differences of what risk is.
Yeah. Right.
Because some different cultures look at risk in completely different ways. So part of the diploma is looking at cultural awareness, which is really important. So you think how diverse the workforce is in the UK. That's, you know, don't even worry about going abroad. Within the United Kingdom is huge. You know, and that could be, you know, it could just be from different counties, not necessarily different backgrounds or ethnicities. Yeah. So I think that's how we think and how we operate and what we think risk is.
Yeah. And if you've got that basic, well, it's not basic, but if you've got that base level understanding of actually, like you've all said, it's all about people and behaviours, you can do anything, can't you? You know, if you understand that.
And there's a word which is a railway term in one respect, but I'll use it: the interoperability of functions. How people interoperate with each other in different functions, I think, is more critical than ever, because your risks that you share as an organisation, as an industry, and across just the safety piece is really important. That people can work together and have this interoperability. And when you see inquiries that come out, and you know, if you look at Grenfell, look at Manchester Arena for instance as well, there's a number of organisations in there that needed to interoperate with each other to manage the risk and then manage the incident afterwards. And there was failings in both, you know, failings / learning points to in both of those inquiries that point towards that need to interoperate. And I think the growing environments we work within, there is that need for safety influence, but also a need for them functions to interoperate to make sure they are situational awareness of each other's risks, so you can manage it.
Yeah. I think you hit that when you said ownership of risk. You can identify the risk, which is what's happened in a number of these instances. But what the organisation didn't do was identify who was the owner, singular, of the risk total. So you may have a slice of it yourself, but there's that lack of ownership of the risk, which is a key, if you like, one of the key challenges of health and safety, because people don't want to own it, because then they're potentially putting themselves under pressure.
Yeah.
But actually, the fact that people then do accept ownership, all the resources can then swing in to support their ownership and management of that risk. But it's that ownership, isn't it, the key?
I'm not sure people understand what ownership is, though, and what it means. Yeah. Because really, it means you've got to do something, doesn't it? In the end, and I'm not altogether sure that plenty of people say, "Yeah, I'm the owner," but what does it really mean? And I think that's quite a key.
Yeah.
And are they accountable?
Well, exactly.
And where
exactly.
How do you hold that accountability to someone?
Yeah.
And getting someone to say, yes, I am accountable. I know we talk about it in the models, and ISO 45001, of course, and HSG 65, the leader at the top is accountable, and then delegates responsibility, but actually getting someone to sign on the dotted line and actually say, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
And then have accountability. Of course, there will be accountability coming down at different levels as well. But it's back to that effective communication again.
Yeah.
And again, that back to the diploma, this is where the landscape changes again and gets you into this mindset. Because it's a wicked problem. Because again, you're dealing with human beings.
And we use the word culture a lot, but capability is equally important. Capability of the people that own the risk to be capable to own it.
Yeah.
Competence. And the organisation has a responsibility for that, but also colleagues and other people do too. And I think that's where it's really important when you've got the right people in the right job who are picking up on these strengths and weaknesses, that strategically is managed. So you've got people that own a risk, are really capable of owning it and know where to go to help escalate something or drive the right behaviours.
Yeah, and I think, we're talking here about the diploma. For people like yourselves that come out of the diploma successfully, and you've got that qualification and you progress in whatever way along the IOSH membership levels, if that's the route you choose to go, you're right in between that level of, CEO type management and, the rest of the workforce, and you've got to have both skills, haven't you? You've got to, educate upwards and influence people, but you've also got to look after the people at the ground level that are doing the work. So it gives you hopefully gives you those right skills to do that. Okay, thank you very much. So more of a general question here. I feel like that a lot of people talk about the UK as being the sort of exemplar in health and safety, and UK health and safety is brilliant and with sort of world leader. And I know different examples, you've got international experience. So that statement about UK is the best at health and safety. Do you think that's true? And any comments on UK health and safety at all? Anyone want to start off?
The most extreme.
So I was in a global role, literally every continent, almost every country across the globe. I would say the UK is, people look up to the UK because of the health and safety framework that we've got. They also, I think not jealousy is the wrong word, but they would like to have something similar. And there's also quite a lot of adaptation and taking the UK system and trying to implement it in their own countries, within their own regulatory systems. So I would say, whilst the UK system's not perfect, clearly it's not perfect, but I think there's certainly up there at the top of the table, and there's a lot actually to be quite proud about in a way, because it's we're part of that system. So that's good.
Okay.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I was going to say I would agree with that. So I've seen UAE systems, Saudi Arabia, recently Norway as well, and their regulations and everything else. And they all are all based, if you look back, on the Health and Safety Work Act 1974. If you take Saudi Arabia as an example, they've got the royal warrant signed by the King of Saudi Arabia. That was signed in 2018. So if you think culturally, we've been going on at this with an Act of Parliament since 1974. Somewhere like Saudi Arabia is catching up fast, but has a different sort of they're in a different part of the journey, only signed, you know, their acts by the King in 2018. So if you look at that as a maturity model, we're way ahead. And actually, if you look at the ISO standards, you know, plan, do, check out, continual improvement, you know, that's based on HSE 65, you know, which is UK, you know, doctrine.
Yeah.
So I think we are world leaders, definitely. And like Paul says, it's not perfect, nothing's perfect. That's why we do plan, do, check out, continual improvement, because you're always refining, improving and growing. But I'd say, and I've seen Australian and New Zealand safety management systems and talked to those consultants from those countries as well, and they do look up to and compare themselves and contrast against the UK system.
And whilst I don't disagree with you, you know, the HSE reported up until March this year, you know, 138 people lost their lives. You know, 50 falling from height, you know, 51 in construction. You know, so although we think we're up there, I think there's still a massive opportunity for us to improve. And the other thing is great, you know, the HSE come up with this report, they come up with it on a yearly basis, but where does that go? You know, it's not communicated in national press, it's not communicated on the news, you know, so if they could raise the whole profile of that, you know, it may be that these smaller organisations, you know, where these fatalities are actually occurring, might actually take a look inwards themselves and think, so what can we do differently? You know, is there an opportunity here for us to look at the diploma course, whatever it may be, you know, to raise the knowledge and the learning within our own organisation so we can improve our performance? We may see that 138 then drops below 100, you know, which would be fantastic, and then we really would be world class then.
And I think this is where IOSH sort of swings in, back to Dave and his journey through IOSH, etc., is that IOSH take that report and look at it. And in North Wales, where I'm from, you know, there's a lot of farming industry, and there's a big push this year on safety in farming, because if you look at the accident stats, there's a lot of accidents and incidents in farming because of all the, you know, there's hundreds and thousands of farms, lots of machinery, young people from the age of 12 can drive tractors and trailers and stuff, so there's lots going on there. So, but it's again back to exactly what you're saying there, Paul, is about communicating that message out. Very difficult if you look at this, if you take that as an example, down to individual families and very small, you know, micro to large farming businesses. The larger ones are probably doing it. It's all the smaller ones that aren't. So it's a wicked problem, really, to get that message out.
It's been a great opportunity as well.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, they should be doing more.
It never sleeps.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we need to be slightly careful though about saying, you know, terminology, world leaders and all this sort of stuff. We have a very good system. It's embedded. It's well understood in the majority of cases. There's still, unfortunately, things that go wrong. But going on to Dave's point about interoperability, and what you said, Paul, actually everybody wants the same outcome. And I think from a UK perspective, what we need to be careful of is that we don't try and impose or superimpose or deliver our approach to somebody else, recognising that their outcome, safety, is still the same. Their journey might be. So again, it's how we can, and Paul, you've obviously done this, and well, you did, Kev, actually, so it's how we can help shape and support them without imposing on them.
Keep it simple, straightforward, is how I sort of span it. And it did work, and I think the feedback from people who had a completely perception of risk was interesting. When people came up to me, Saudi nationals who've got a different way of looking at risk, just culturally, and said, I understand what you're talking about now. Because the simple message is, you want to go to work and you want to come back at the end of the day. And you don't want to be ill, you don't want to die, you don't want to get injured, and the people you're looking after and responsible for, there is a duty of care that you're looking after them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's many industries in our country that have great safety records. I work in one of them, but, you know, society's changing. You know, there's a next generation of people that want to be led and managed in a different way. There's different systems that are developing all the time. There's different societal risks, climate change being one, you know, the people, you know, the society we live within. So there's always that need to try to keep up with it. And I think that ever-changing pace of trying to keep up with the risk is a danger to us if we're not careful as well. And I think how we manage risk in the past is not how we'll manage it in the future. And that's something that I think both safety professionals, organisations, regulators, all the people out there that have that view we have to move together on that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean it's very challenging. You don't know what the answers are. None of us do.
Because everyone has an opinion.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
But I think this again is the diploma, and it was
Right.
mentioned earlier on, a principles-based approach. So if you've got common principles that can then be adapted to your circumstances, then you're into consistency. If you've got consistency, you've then got confidence, and so on and so forth.
But I think the sort of argument of proportionality is emerging.
Yeah.
So there's a proportionality of what financial burden it lays upon the business, but also what burden it lays upon people's lives and ability to undertake their work. You know, because we've got different types of people that are coming through that want to work in a different way, and work means different to them, whilst mixed in with people that are, have been through that process for a long time. I think the question of what's proportionate now and what measures we have in the future and how we manage safety risk and get people to adhere to it too. So it actually makes sense, because if it doesn't make sense, people won't adhere to it, and then you have a risk. Yeah. I think that question is going to test.
No, I agree. Yeah, but I agree. But what I would say is that, to bring things full circle for you, for us all, having done the diploma at one point or another, it gives you those skills, to understand people and to be adaptable. Because, you did the diploma 5 years ago. You'll like this. You don't ever have to go back and do it again. So it's not a qualification that you have to renew. The trust is, the deal is, you do the diploma and then you keep yourselves up to date, and as we all do as safety professionals, through CPD. So you've got those basic skills that you just keep sort of sharpened as you go along. But the understanding of human behaviour and why people do things, you get that understanding at the diploma level, which isn't really mentioned much in the sort of lower certificate courses.
It gives you a really strong foundation.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas the certificate is like a sub-foundation.
Yeah.
So I think that level 6 diploma landscape gives you the really
certificate is one pillar.
Yeah.
It's one pillar of that overall foundation.
Yeah.
But it's only one, really.
Yeah.
And there's obviously several. So
Yeah.
And that learning journey, because again, some industries are ahead of others. Further manage risk, you can learn quite quickly off others and develop your own systems and your own self.
Yeah, and you some of you have, some of you haven't, but you could go to different companies, different employers, you could set up your own business, whatever it might be. So you need to have those sort of base level skills that never go away, which is more about the behaviour and the people bit.
That never changes.
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. Law changes and all that sort of stuff does, but that doesn't. It's interesting, isn't it? If you look at the diploma, I can't remember, was it 6 weeks when you did it? Or, it's spread over many, a few months. But
Drafted in 6 months, I think. Was it 9 months?
9
months. 9 months.
Very unusual, obviously a very talented group, but that amount of time there, if you look at the proportions of what's included, I think a lot of people think, it's legal, a lot about the law, and I've got to know this regulation inside and out and apply all of this. And out of those 6 weeks or whatever it might be, there's 1 week that's about law. Yeah, and it's probably your favourite week of the course.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and it's the gateway to what's behind that.
Yeah, but exactly. Being serious, it is. Yes, that's right.
It's interesting. And it's important, because I think, first week is certainly the good week to really get yourself immersed. When I said earlier about that broader context from the certificate, you're not so narrow looking at some certain piece of legislation. You start looking across and see how the framework actually works and how it touches different areas of your activities. Then you go and actually learn about how you don't properly manage it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got really fond memories of when people have done the certificate and they come into that first day on the diploma, and you go into the depths of the law. And then people look, because there's a lot more to it than you think there is at a certificate.
Yeah. I'll never forget that day. I've never been in a factory in my life. Yeah. From the background I've got, and actually going in that day and seeing that and seeing system processes and controls was really, really fascinating.
Yeah. And it's those, depending who you are and what you've done before, it's those little things that sort of change. I mean, I think, you don't have to agree, I think everyone at one point or another gets like a light bulb moment of, this is why it's important, or that's particularly interesting, or I've never thought of that. Even as someone delivering the course, that happens. Because it's, as you all said, it's the shared experience, isn't it? You got so much out of just knowing each other as well as, and talking together, as well as the sort of teaching element.
Yeah, because, I got memories of asking Paul about, health and safety at Tata Steel with big bits of molten steel going over a brew out in the areas, in this very building.
Yeah.
And him saying, there's some really dangerous stuff and people cutting corners, stepping across, channels of molten steel and stuff like that. So, but the same sort of shortcuts that could be in the rail industry, jumping across the rails.
Well, we also had the hot water of the tea lady going up, or man, or whoever, going up and down the train.
Yeah.
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 Scolding themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a diversity of what we all very common risks.
Right, and other people would never have that experience, would they, if they didn't work in,
Well, when I entered the room and you're sitting with two army men, Paul, from the backgrounds they've got, and you're thinking, wow. And then these guys are fascinated about what we do on the railway. You think, actually, that's when you do really start to enjoy it, and you start to go back to your own employer in industry and think, you really do enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
But you think of the risk that the rail industry holds is immense, because it's all customer facing, isn't it? And all those moving parts are unpredictable customers, and hundreds of thousands of them moving all over the place, massive bits of machinery moving left, right, and electricity at work off the charts.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've all started the same diploma course,
Yeah.
but we're all from different organisations.
And all of that safety management would have evolved afterwards.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, our business is evolving, as you know, Chris. We're moving more and more into construction. But I could take this learning from the diploma into the new businesses.
Yeah.
Nothing's different, nothing's changed. The law's the same. How we manage risk is the same. It's just how you actually apply that learning.
100%, yeah. And just to bring things full circle then, at the risk of asking you an unprepared for question, are you happy you did, or are you glad you did the diploma? Was it the right thing to do? And is the one thing that you took from your studies which, the most important thing to you? What do you think?
So definitely the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Helped me understand the strategic context, which we then took back to the Army.
Okay.
As Kev said, HSG 65, Plan, Do, Check, Act. The Army, in its own way, has been doing that already. It just hadn't realised it. So we're able to codify that behaviour so that it's now adopted, obviously, across the force. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't done the diploma.
Okay. Excellent.
And for me, it gave me a lot of confidence knowing that what we were doing as an organisation, we was actually doing it correctly. But it gave us that diploma then gave me an opportunity to say, right, where can we actually improve? Where are the areas that we can actually improve? So what can we build on? So I've got no regrets at all. I'm glad I did it.
Okay.
I think the importance of referencing and how you go away and find your way around these broad safety management systems.
Okay. Yeah.
Because in industries that have broad sets of activity, and sometimes it can be quite daunting that you think you need to know everything, but actually it's about how you use experts and how you reference at the right times, depending on what risks you're dealing with. It certainly was one of my biggest takeaways.
Okay.
I think my biggest takeaway was something you said in one of the, I can't remember which module
Sounds
it was.
unlikely to me.
Was it? No, it wasn't. It was have that holistic view of everything. And I think the diploma unlocked the way my brain worked, actually.
Okay.
From maybe being very sort of prescriptive before to being completely holistic and looking at everything, like auditing and everything, but right across the whole spectrum. And I think where we've talked about the similarities between different industries and what Paul said there, the principles of the diploma you can apply to any industry going. All you've got to do is what Dave just said, is learn about that subject matter, and it all fits. And you keep that holistic view, and the human factors was a massive game changer for me, and I apply it all the time, and it works every time.
And you know where to look.
Yeah, I've still got the folders.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Anything to add?
Yeah, I would say when I came in, I said at the start, I came into this as we were integrating the function. I probably had a perception when I look back of health and safety as being all about compliance and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And when I came out of it at the other end, I had a completely different view. That health and safety actually was a fundamental part of the business, not something you bolt on.
Brilliant.
So that changed me considerably.
Fantastic.
And it also gave me the right language to use with the board of directors, for example, and gave me the credibility that I needed in that job. So it was very
Amazing.
I absolutely wouldn't change anything.
Brilliant. All right. Well, that's the answer I hope to get, obviously. So thank you very much. And again, thank you all for coming back. It's really unusual, I think, to be able to catch up with a group years later after they've done their qualification and find, was it the right thing to find out? Was it the right thing to do? Have they applied it? And more importantly, that you've all stuck together and, you're still helping each other out. And we all still talk, of course, as well. Brilliant. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed today's show. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes, and I'll see you on the next one.